Welcome to CrackTalk.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Dr. J here, and I got Scott in the house, and welcome to CrackTalk.
Welcome to CrackTalk.
Where we take unrelated topics that don't seem to have much to do with chiropractic, and we kind of bring them home. But first, I want to just start this. If you're liking the content we're throwing out on CrackTalk, Scott, what do they do?
They need to subscribe. As they say, smash that subscribe button. Follow us. We've got this on.
Can they share it?
They can, yeah. Like it, share it, subscribe,
All right, good.
Follow, and share it with everybody that you know that might be interested in the topics that we're talking about.
Spread the word.
Please.
Because once again, what's the premise of CrackTalk? We want to educate people. We want to get you inspired that you have control, or you can take control of your life and live a better, happier, healthier existence. All right. And then the thing that we try to bring it home with is giving you guys actionable steps to go into your life and take action in your life to live a happier, healthier life. So that's why we're here. So today, what are we talking about, Scott?
We are going to talk about pediatrics, Jay.
Why do children get adjusted?
Yeah, kids in chiropractic.
Okay.
Question we get all the time.
All the time. And here's the first thing I say. I said, when a patient comes into our clinic and they see kids running around and they ask about it, I said, we dedicate at least 30% of our practice to children. And the look is just like, what? Kids need chiropractic too? Why? They don't have pain.
That's the thing. Everybody thinks that if you're a child, your spine is perfect. So everybody says, like, why would a child need chiropractic? They're a kid. Everything's perfect on a child, right?
And I had the exact same question when I started chiropractic school. Even though I had been adjusted my whole life, I had no idea what the chiropractor was doing. I got adjusted on a park bench here, in his office there, because my dad's best friend was a chiropractor up in Illinois, Scott. And so it was a very happening thing. It just like every time we saw the guy, we all got adjusted. And then, or we would go to our local chiropractor when we got sick, and I didn't know what was happening except for my neck crack, my back crack, my mid back crack. I always felt good because as a kid, it was just kind of like crazy cool, right? That your bones crack like your knuckles and you drove your mom and dad crazy. But I never really knew until I went to chiropractic school the why. All right. But I just want to start with some stats before we talk about the why.
Yeah.
I always like to say, well, why not? Well, let's talk about what's happening. Prevalence rate right now, 30 million, Scott, ER visits each year are children going to the ER because either they're sick or they're injured. 30 million ER visits. I got some stats here. The prevalence rate of ADD is 9.4% of children under the age of 5. 9.4 of all children in the United States are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. High prevalence rate.
Wow.
Think about this, 6.1 million children a year diagnosed with ADD. This is not small numbers, people. Falls. A child up to the age 5 has over 1,000 falls, and we all have seen it. Let me tell you something. They fall out of swings. They fall out of diaper changing pads.
We've talked about this. So from like age 25 to 30 till now in my 50s, not many falls. From age like 5 till through teenage years, tons.
Well, hey, why can't we fall as we've aged? Is, if I fell off a diaper changing table right now onto the ground, call an ambulance. Yeah. A child falls off. I remember my kids rolling off because they're psycho, and they roll right off onto the floor, and they just bounce off the floor. They cry a little bit. Nothing's happened. So think about that. So up to 1,000 major falls by the time they're age 5. Ear infections. 5 out of 6 children experience ear infections called otitis media between the age of 0 and 3 years old. And Scott, this is even scarier. 1 out of 15 of those children go under the knife because it's the only opportunity to get their ears, have tubes put in them to release the pressure because it's so uncomfortable. Headaches. Oh my goodness, we're talking about headaches, Scott, in our clinic with children. I have never seen children with headaches. It was hit and miss. Now it is prevalent. Yeah. Kids on their devices in a bad ergonomic position. They're watching TV at a young age. They're coming in and having these throbbing migraine, cervicogenic headaches. Also, they have eye strain headaches just from too much screen time. So we're going to talk about that. Scoliosis. We've all heard that. That is some of the condition we see all the time, and we've talked about this. 2 to 3% of children under the age of 12 are diagnosed with scoliosis. But what I want to say is that's 2 to 3% that are diagnosed.
Right.
There are so many children that have come into my clinic and they've never had their spine checked. They just did the toe touch at school.
Right.
And if their wing didn't go up like this, you did it, I did
it.
Then the school nurse was like, oh, you don't have scoliosis.
You're good.
You're not knighted. We come in this office, I always say we check every child via x-ray if they're of that age to make sure that we're identifying, do they have scoliosis, so we can catch it quick.
Right. Because it is easier
than waiting.
I say that.
You find out you have scoliosis when you're 20s, in your 30s,
Right.
Those bones have set, degeneration has already set in, you got a problem. Okay, not that a problem that can't be fixed or relieved or alleviated, but you have a major problem. A child, their bones are so amenable to positioning and you can retrain their muscles, ligament, tendons, they have more of a chance.
Right.
But I want to get in this too, the birth process. Right. And this is where it all starts. And I think this is where we started with, we were talking about women being pregnant, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy,
then
post-pregnancy. And we talked about children getting adjusted at day one,
Right.
week one. Why? It sounds outrageous. Well, not only is the birth traumatic on the mother, right? And I sympathize with every mother because I've not given birth and I'm not about to, I can't. But I sympathize with that. But also be very sympathetic to the child, whether cesarean or natural delivery. There is so many things going on, Scott. So much pressure on the upper cervical part of their spine. They got to get their shoulders through the canal. Their head has to come through the canal, right? Then their back has to come through the canal. Then their hips have to come through the canal. And all this stuff after they're born.
Right.
Your body has to take over. The brain, or not the brain has to send message down the spinal cord, out the spinal nerves, and say, okay, let's take that cone head.
Now that's itself.
Let's relax it, and because it doesn't have to go through the canal again, and let's get it back.
Well, now it gets busy. It's almost, you think about birth, then once there is birth, then that baby's brain goes into action and say, okay, now we've got to start making things.
Scott, think about it. It's breathing for the first time. Its heart's beating on its own. Even though it's kind of been beating on its own, it's digesting food for the first time. There's a lot happening.
So that brain turns on.
Yes. And the coming through the birthing process is so traumatic on the neck. Equivalent would be it being a major auto vehicle accident. So think about any of us.
Repeat that. So the birthing process.
A child going through natural delivery or possibly the same or equivalent to somebody getting a major motor vehicle accident. It could be just as traumatic.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge, powerful statement.
So after I've just listed that, so then it's like, why would we not?
Well, then let me hammer this home,
adjust
because
children.
Every podcast that we do, if there's any one thing that anybody takes out of Crack Talk, is this lesson right here. So imagine what we just said. Birthing process is equivalent to a major automobile accident. That child was just born into this world. Its brain kicks in, its heart's beating on its own the first time, it's digesting food on its own the first time. So let's just say in that process, one of these vertebrae got out of place. It's putting pressure of a dime, the weight of a dime on a nerve
that we talked about.
Reduces the communication by 70%.
70%. So think about that.
Yes.
Or is the child having this best opportunity from the start if you don't get their spine checked? Right. So one thing I always like to talk about too, Scott, is most people, what they really fear about the child coming into the chiropractic office is how are they going to get adjusted? Because maybe you've been adjusted, you got your neck cracked, your back cracked, your low back. We did a whole thing on TikTok about the fake adjustment,
the power of the crack,
the power of the crack, where the sounds come from. When you're adjusting children, their bones haven't even completely ossified yet or become bone. All right, they're starting to become bone. So their spine is still coming together to protect that spinal cord. Their sutures in their skull are settling down, going from cone to coming around and wrapping and protecting their brain. As this stuff is happening, and you went through that traumatic process, you better believe, I mean, it's not hard to imagine that some of these bones could move out of alignment very quickly or heal in an improper situation, creating childhood problems, ADD, headaches, My mom, I said I was very colicky. That's why I first started going to the chiropractor, right? Inability to digest food, get food into my gut and then, into my, I would just throw it up and I would just scream nonstop. So one thing that we see in the chiropractic office all the time is patients are bringing us these children usually when they already had the problem. Like, doc, my child is up and diagnosed with ADD. They want to put them on a heavy medication, Ritalin, Adderall, whatever it is. And I just don't know how I feel about that because I've read about it and it seems like it, or they maybe even have tried it and the kid goes into complete blank. Like they give them an overstimulant. Right, so a kid that's hyperactive, they will actually give them more of a stimulant to then bring them down. So then they actually get laser focused. The problem is they go into almost like a deadhead state. And nobody wants to have that for your children. No. I know you wouldn't, I wouldn't want it. So they bring them in, they say, hey, my child's having ADD. And I love that we talked about epigenetics last week as well, because the first thing I evaluate when some child is at that state, what are you putting in their body? Because most of the time they're ADD, rocking a Mountain Dew and an oatmeal cream pie, ping-ponging around the freaking office. And I'm like, first thing, man, before we would check
let's take away the sweet tarts.
Let's take away the Snicker bar and the chocolate ice cream you fed him right after school today and see if he has a chance. The next approach would be then, okay, so that's the epigenetic part, is like, let's environmentally look at their surroundings to see how their genes are expressing. Then we say, okay, let's evaluate their spine. We do a very similar evaluation that we would do on an adult. We palpate their spine. We do orthopedic neurological tests to see if they have any nerve roots. We do, I like the skin test to make sure, see if we're scraping their skin to see if their dermatomes are active on side to side. I do muscle tests. Okay, are they the same level of strength on side to side? Okay. Range of motion, because see, a child, they don't feel pain like adults. That's why they can fall.
Gotcha.
Right? I think that it's almost like a dog. A dog has, like, what did they say, a 10-time pain threshold than an adult. Well, children are very similar, even though they cry a lot. They can take a major impact and bounce right back. So we take them through a very similar process because they don't normally verbalize it. If they can't talk, ages 1 to 2 to 3, they're not usually saying, hey, my back hurts. Like my wife says, I say that all the time. Because it's true, my back hurts all the time. But they can't verbalize it, Scott. So we have to go in there and then see really what's indicating for subluxation. And we take them through the steps I just said to you. And then we add on to that range of motion. Are they fixated one side to another? Which means that they have a subluxation, they have a fixation in their spine that's not allowing the proper communication from brain out the body. Then if they're of age and they're able to stand, we will take a few x-rays. Okay. And by the way, the x-rays, and this is one thing, you're going to take x-rays of children. That's got to be terrible. These are not the x-rays they took back in the day.
These are not your parents' x-rays.
Or the ones they make the movies about where they hit the button, the person fries. The x-rays in our office are equivalent to standing out in the sun for 5 minutes. That's the level of radiation.
Got it.
So I always like to prepare every parent for that, because that is a major concern. I had that same concern. What do you mean we're x-raying children when I started school? And they took me through the whole process. I was like, oh, not as big. So what do you think about that, Scott? It seems like you had a question.
Well, I have a question. So, and it seems like you're getting to it, is we go through, when you bring a child in, we're going through, the exams and things like that, taking a look, doing some x-rays if needed, if the child qualifies. So the one thing that always pops in my head is whenever you think about a child and going to the chiropractor, and we talked about it with the power of the crack, is, do you adjust a child? I mean, I always it's like, hey, I don't want you cracking my baby's neck or something like that and all this stuff. So this brings us back to what we talked about. Is there hundreds of ways?
It's the number one fear. That's I think why they're not bringing the child into the chiropractor, because they've used their chiropractic experience. They've had bones cavitate. They've had bones move in and out of place, and it feels weird to them. So I always like to prep everybody that how we adjust children is far different than how we adjust adults. Or even geriatrics. You're not going to adjust a baby that weighs 6 pounds right out of the womb, man. The same as you're going to adjust a linebacker that's playing for the NFL.
Right.
And so that's why, once again, I always like to say, get a recommendation. Find a chiropractor that really treats a lot of children in their community,
clinic,
in their community, in their community clinic. And there's no better way to find that outside of getting a recommendation. So schools are a great way, finding, parents that have like age kids or older kids and say, hey, has your kid ever went to a chiropractor? And then you will be surprised. This is what I'm always surprised is how many people are actually actively getting their kids adjusted because they find out something. When you get a child, how fast they respond. You get a child, and you take them, and say they have sinus infections or chronic ear infections or having digestive issues, and you start adjusting their spine. You get their brain properly communicating with their body, getting that weight of the dime off there, getting those nerves going. Magic happens. Children heal exponentially faster than adults because they don't have the scar tissue. They don't have the abuse. They usually don't have super bad diets as I have. You know what I'm saying?
Well, then it's just years. So it's one of those things they don't have that years of whatever has built up. So that is one thing that I've seen in the clinics is with children, and you just nailed it, is, their body is running at maximum level.
All the time.
All the time. I mean, it's at its best. So yes, you imagine you make one little adjustment, you open up that nerve passageway, boom. I mean, it's
immediate. Dude, we've had kids, we adjust them, they run to the freaking bathroom. Kids that are bedwetting, which is a big deal if you're a parent. They're wetting the bed at night and they're 5 years old. They get 1, 2, 3, 5 adjustments. Dude, they don't bedwet anymore. And the parent is like, I don't even know how this is working. They're having allergies. They get adjusted over a couple weeks. They don't have allergies anymore.
So let me ask you this. So what are things, so if you're a parent out there and you've got a child, what are some things that you wouldn't think are related to chiropractic, but you have seen over the years that chiropractic has helped kids with?
Well, I want, because I like where you're going with this. So I can go through, us as chiropractors, what we do is we just help the body heal. Okay? So it's like if the kid's dealing with headaches, ear infections, scoliosis. I mean, we can name all the biggies, but then there's little ones. Kids that have tics, kids that have maybe a muscle spasm, torticollis or something. We even some special needs children we deal with. They come in wheelchairs. We do our best. We treat them because I just believe, Scott, no matter what the condition is, that if we're getting the brain freely communicating down the spinal cord, out the spinal nerves to that child's body, it's going to have its best chance. And I think everybody listening now would realize that's the best opportunity.
Right.
We talked about, hey, if you put bad food in and you're subluxated and you're not getting right information to your gut, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're putting great organic food in or bad food in. Your body's going to digest it poorly. You're not going to get that. Regardless. Same thing with children. Here are some of the things. Why or who should get their children checked to then see if they're qualified for chiropractic, right? If your kid's playing sports, my kids were on that freaking soccer field getting their teeth kicked in. If they're gymnastics
or even
any sports,
or even prior to starting that sport, if they are interested in sports, have a chiropractor check out their spine just before. So therefore, if there's anything going on, you actually get it under care or can get it going in the right direction before they ever start the sport. I look back on me. That's how we all ended up probably in chiropractic anyway.
Was after the fact.
After I got hurt.
You had a problem, then you got an injury, and then at the injury compound, you had pain, and as an adult, you could kind of verbalize, hey, it hurts.
Imagine if I would have gone in and had a chiropractor check out my spine prior and say, oh, you got a problem with L5, you start getting some adjustments, get it corrected before I ever start that repetitive motion of what is sports.
Yes. It's just one of those things. You want to give your kids the best opportunity. So how do you do that? Preventative medicine is where we all should live. And this is where we talk about inspire. We want to educate people. Like, hey, get kids checked. to see if they qualify. The inspiring part is, like what you just said, let's give these children of ours the best opportunity, because they are the next generation that are going to run the planet.
Right.
Let's give them a life without back pain, headaches, neck pain, digestive issues, anxiety, all these, maybe rheumatoid arthritis or any of these autoimmune diseases where your body kind of like turns on itself. MS, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, these kind of things. These are heavy hitters. And I found even those type of people, they respond great to chiropractic care. So first, educate, get kids adjusted. Second, get inspired that your kid can actually be healthier and happier. What's the action step? Get your kid checked by a local chiropractor. Who? What children? That's what I get. Well, what children? All children. They're playing sports. They're not playing sports. If they're watching TV, if they're not watching TV. If your kid is on this planet.
If your kid has a cell phone.
Scott, if it has 2 legs and 2 arms and it's walking on this planet, it's falling like crazy. But what alerts? So this is what I would say. Alerts. If your child's walking a little unbalanced, they could easily have a hip imbalance.
Okay.
Get them adjusted. If you see them straining their eyes, or they have to get glasses too early, or they're clenching their jaw all the time, or they seem to be crying all the time. Now we're talking about little ones, 0 to 3 years old. Look for these indications that just means their body is not functioning properly. A child's way of letting you know is they cry.
Right.
They sometimes are hyperactive too. They throw fits, they throw tantrums. That is a high level of knowing this child needs to be checked.
Okay, great point. I picked up on that. Is if you have an infant newborn and you haven't had a check, but you notice it is crying,
incessantly crying,
over and over,
spitting up milk like wildfire.
Maybe a good point is like, hey, going to the doctor, put on there, hey, let's go have the spine checked.
Yeah.
Let's check the integrity of that spine.
Yeah, and once again, making sure you're getting that child checked by a qualified chiropractor that doesn't have to specialize in children, but has put their hands on a tremendous amount of children. And the way I would do that is just get a recommendation, Scott, because I don't want my child to be this ER visit. I don't want my child or my grandchildren, I'm about to have mine in 3 weeks, my first grandchild. I don't want them to be this statistic. I want them to be outside the statistics called, we had this child checked, little Fallon Blue was checked at the get. Right? She's been given the best opportunity right out of the right out of the birthing process. Check that child, make sure that nervous system is functioning, because right like you said, bam, as soon as they come in this world, their nervous system activates and now they are a self-contained, healing and functioning human. Yeah. And they're on their own. And we as parents, our job is to make sure we're facilitating the best opportunity on this life for them. So we're supposed to be doing all the epigenetics, creating that environment around them so they have the best chance.
Yes, and that you hit it nail on the head, and it was what rang in my head was create that epigenetic for that child from the get-go. So that's its environment.
And having chiropractic at the cornerstone of their health care. I'm not saying that kids aren't going to need antibiotics or need this, that, and the other. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, what's the risk in bringing a child into a chiropractor that's non-invasive? We're working with that child's body each and every time, ensuring its brain is communicating down that spinal cord, out those spinal nerves, to every cell, tissue, and organ in their body, giving it its best opportunity to have its best life without disease and pain.
Right, which we kind of discussed last week when we were talking about pregnancy and chiropractic and pregnancy. And I made the comment that, as we go through, and even when we talk about this on this podcast, it starts to become apparent that even before you're going to end up having to go to the doctor and things like that.
Yes.
But chiropractic should almost be, if you think about it, with the importance of the brain-body connection, it should almost be that first step of anything. It's like, okay, if there's a problem, it's like, first let's go get our spine checked by a chiropractor. Let's check that out. Then it's like, okay, make that first priority, because it may be taken care of there, or you may say, okay, we're here, then we may need to go to the next step. What is that? Is that a doctor? Is that this?
Well, Scott, look at our current healthcare system. 55% of all medication made on the planet is consumed by U.S. citizens.
Unreal.
Yet we're one of the sickest communities on the planet. There, right there, alarm bells should be going on, because we have flipped. We have inverted what healthcare is, what preventative healthcare is. See, back in the day, a doctor would come to your house and diagnose you with something and say, these are the things you need to remove from your life. It was a very different conversation. Right. Now it's medication. Medication doesn't work. You're now under the knife, and then you go into rehab. Mm-hmm. And if the knife doesn't work, we go under more medication, and it becomes this cycle effect that people end up as geriatrics. I think the average geriatric's taking 12 to 16 medications daily.
Unbelievable.
And I don't want to get into that right now because it could be another podcast. My dad's dealing with that. He's in a medicated coma. Kind of. Yeah. He's just taking so many medication that his body is trying to figure it out. So I find out that there's a lot of children that are in a medicated state, whether it's Adderall, Ritalin, antibiotics, steroid, NSAIDs. I mean, I hear an incessant amount of children are on these medications, and what those are doing often are blocking their ability to heal and be well. So we flipped it. So from the start of the child's life, they're in the hospital. That's why there's 30 million, Scott, ER visits, because the first response that we've all been taught is take the child to the ER.
Doctor, right.
And I'm going to give you a great analogy. All right, and I've used this with my children. We had a rule, and I'll bring it back to why this is so important. Often we don't give the body the opportunity to heal itself properly. Okay. So we then have to go to second step. So I'm going to use a fever. And by no way am I telling you guys to run your fever all the way up in your child and not be irresponsible. Be very responsible for parents. If you're watching this, you're a very responsible parent. But here it is. We had a rule. If it got over to 104, we had liquid Tylenol, okay, which would knock that fever down. We never got there. We got to 103, one night. We're sitting the child in the bathtub. They're not lethargic. They're alert. Now, they would sleep often. I mean, anybody that's had a child that's that hot, they feel like a burning coal. And your thought as a parent, I just got to protect it. Mm-hmm. But I believe that the body is sensing, okay? The body's sensing there's a foreign particle in their blood that's going to cause harm. So what happens, just like Scott, if you were out in that Canada camping trip, what's the first thing you do when you grab water from the pond? What do you do to it before you drink it? You just drink it.
You boil it.
Everybody listen, you boil it, because boiling the water heats it up enough that it kills anything in there that can harm your body.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
This is like fact one in camping.
Right.
Don't drink creek water or don't drink pond water.
Yeah.
Your body's first mechanism and first response to healing is heat it up. Yeah. Because what it'll do is it'll kill almost all the bacteria and viral particles in your body, those foreign invaders. But here's what happens. If you reduce that fever, okay? If you reduce that fever by giving the child Motrin or Tylenol and any of these type of things, you then have to go second phase and give the child what? Antibiotics. Because now they're in a second tier form. So I would always say, give the child's body a chance to heal and be well first. That's a great example of believing in the wisdom and the integrity of the body. But also, my kids have been adjusted since they were babies. Right. And we've made sure that they're adjusted through the whole process. So that's something that I do have at home. I'm adjusting the children as we're going. But always evaluating, we would constantly check them about every hour, every 2 hours when they were awake to see what their temperature was doing.
Right.
Right? So this just goes back to why get child checked. If your kid is dealing with fever, get them checked. If you get them adjusted in the cervical spine, Scott, they're going to have an immediate reaction with their immune system, and their ability to heal and be well is going to increase, not decrease. Right. So there it is today, our Crack Talk, pediatrics, why children need to get adjusted. Let's not let them be a statistic.
No, start early. You can never start too early.
You can never start too early. And I'm just very, very passionate, if you couldn't tell today, about children getting under care. Let's not let them become a statistic. Let's them be outside of that system and live a happy, healthy life, unlike the rest of us that are dealing with back pain, headaches, neck pain, anything that you could throw at it, we're dealing with. Let's give them a better opportunity than we had.
Exactly. Guys, as always, thanks again for tuning in to Crack Talk. As we stated stated at the beginning of the podcast, if you guys like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe, like us, follow us, share it with somebody that could use this. And we appreciate everything, and we will see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.